Montana Territory, 1879. The late spring sun was setting over the jagged peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains, painting the valley in hues of gold and crimson. Against this backdrop, Logan Fitzgerald sat alone on his front porch, whittling a piece of pine wood into no particular shape. At 26, he was the sole occupant of a homestead that could have housed a family of 8. His lean, muscular frame and handsome features, framed by sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck, had caught the eye of many young women in nearby Whitewater Springs. Yet Logan remained alone, convinced that a man who chose the unforgiving frontier life had no business dragging anyone else into it. A man who can't outrun his past has no future to offer, he muttered to himself, the mantra worn smooth by repetition. 3 years ago, he'd watched helplessly as outlaws burned his family's Texas ranch, taking his parents' lives and leaving him with nothing but nightmares and a gnawing guilt that he hadn't been able to protect them. The light stubble on his jaw caught the fading sunlight as he gazed across his property. 200 acres of promising land, a sturdy cabin built by his own hands, a small but growing herd of cattle, and not a soul to share it with. Just how he thought he wanted it. His nearest neighbor, old Samuel Wilson, had been pestering him for months to get civilized and find a wife. Land ain't worth nothing without someone to pass it to, Samuel would say. Logan always responded with the same tight smile. The frontier was no place for tender feelings. Out here, attachment was just another word for vulnerability. Logan stood, stretching his tall frame, and looked to the horizon where storm clouds gathered. He had cattle to check before the weather turned. His horse, a dappled gray gelding named Chief, nickered softly from the corral, sensing the coming ride. I know, boy, Logan said, patting the horse's neck. Just you and me against whatever comes next. That's all we need. But even as he said the words, the hollow feeling in his chest whispered that perhaps they weren't entirely true. 2 days later, Logan rode into Whitewater Springs for supplies. The small but growing settlement boasted a general store, a saloon, a small church, and little else. He tied Chief to the hitching post outside Hadley's General Store, nodding curtly to the few townspeople who greeted him. Logan Fitzgerald, as I live and breathe, Mrs. Hadley called from behind the counter. The plump, gray-haired woman had appointed herself his unofficial guardian since he'd settled in the area. We were beginning to think the wolves got you. Just busy with the herd, Mrs. Hadley, he replied, removing his hat. Need flour, coffee, and some of that beef jerky if you've got it. As Mrs. Hadley gathered his supplies, she chattered about town happenings. Logan barely listened until she mentioned something that caught his attention. And the poor deer, abandoned right there at the altar. Reverend Thompson said in all his years, he'd never seen such a disgraceful display. Who was abandoned? Logan asked, despite his usual policy of avoiding town gossip. Why, Zara Blackwell. Arrived from Boston last month to marry Edward Holloway. He'd been corresponding with her for nearly a year after placing an advertisement for a bride. Then yesterday, with everyone gathered at the church, Edward was nowhere to be found. Left a note saying he'd changed his mind and caught the morning stage to Helena. Logan frowned. That's mighty low. Indeed it is. And now she's stranded with nowhere to go. Her parents passed last winter, which is why she answered the advertisement in the first place. She's staying at the boarding house, but her funds won't last forever. Mrs. Hadley gave him a meaningful look that he pretended not to notice. As Logan left the store, the sky opened up. Rain fell in heavy sheets, forcing him to seek shelter under the awning of the church. That's when he saw her. A young woman stood in the church doorway, seemingly frozen in place as she stared out at the downpour. She wore a simple blue dress that had clearly been chosen for practicality rather than fashion, yet it complemented her slender figure perfectly. Her honey blonde hair was gathered in a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. When she turned, Logan was struck by the clarity of her blue-gray eyes, red-rimmed from crying but determined nonetheless. Looks like we're both trapped, she said with a slight smile. Yes, ma'am, Logan replied, suddenly aware of his mud-splattered boots and trail-worn appearance. I'm Zara Blackwell, she offered, extending a delicate hand. Logan Fitzgerald, he replied, carefully shaking her hand. I heard about what happened. I'm sorry. Her chin lifted slightly. Don't be. Perhaps it was divine intervention. Better to discover his true character now than after vows were exchanged. There was something in her voice, a resilience that belied her refined appearance. Logan found himself curious about this woman who could face public humiliation with such dignity. The rain intensified, drumming against the church roof. "Would you like to wait inside?" Zara asked, gesturing to the church door. Reverend Thompson wouldn't mind. Logan hesitated, then nodded. They sat in a pew near the back, an awkward silence stretching between them until Zara spoke again. "Do you have far to travel once the rain stops?" "My homestead's about 7 miles west," he replied. "Just past Elk Creek." "Ah, so you're the mysterious rancher I've heard about." Mrs. Hadley mentioned a handsome young man who built a house big enough for a dozen, but lives there all alone. Her eyes widened, and a blush colored her cheeks. "I apologize. That was forward of me." Logan felt his own face warm. "Mrs. Hadley talks too much." "She means well," Zara said with a small laugh. "Without her, I'm not sure what I would have done yesterday." "What will you do now?" Logan asked, surprising himself with his interest. Zara's expression sobered. "I have enough money for another week at the boarding house. After that," she shrugged, "I'll find work. I can teach, so keep accounts." I refused to return to Boston defeated. Her determination stirred something in Logan. Admiration, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit who refused to be beaten by circumstances. The rain began to slacken, and Logan stood. "I should get back before dark." "Of course," Zara said, standing as well. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Fitzgerald." "Logan," he corrected automatically, then added impulsively. "If you need work, Mrs. Wilson, my neighbor's wife, mentioned needing help with their children. They live about a mile from my place." Her eyes brightened. "Truly? Would you mind telling me more about them?" And so Logan found himself describing the Wilson family, their 5 children, and their farm. By the time the rain stopped entirely, he had offered to speak to them on her behalf. As he mounted Chief and tipped his hat in farewell, Logan was struck by the strange feeling that something had shifted in his carefully ordered world. He pushed the thought aside. He was simply helping a stranger in need, nothing more. That's what neighbors did in harsh territory. But as he rode home, Zara Blackwell's dignified resilience stayed with him, challenging the fortress he'd built around his heart. 3 days later, Logan found himself driving a wagon toward town, ostensibly to deliver a letter from Mrs. Wilson offering Zara a position as a governess for their children. In truth, he could have sent the letter with anyone heading to town, but something compelled him to deliver it personally. He found Zara at the boarding house, reading on the small front porch. Her face lit up when she saw him, and Logan felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. "Mrs. Wilson would be pleased to meet you," he said, handing her the letter. "She's offering room and board plus a small wage to start." Zara read the letter quickly, her expression brightening. "This is perfect. When could I begin?" "Today, if you're willing," Logan replied. "I brought the wagon to help with your things." Within the hour, they were headed back toward the Wilson farm, Zara's modest trunk secured in the wagon bed. As they traveled, Zara told him about her life in Boston after her parents' deaths, the struggle to maintain their small home, the mounting debts, and finally, the decision to answer Edward Holloway's advertisement. "I thought it providential," she admitted. "A new start in a beautiful territory with a man who claimed to want a true partner." She shook her head ruefully. His letters were so eloquent about building a life together. "Some men aren't worth the paper they write on," Logan said, his voice harder than he intended. "You sound as though you speak from experience," Zara observed. Logan hesitated, then found himself telling her about the outlaws who had destroyed his family's ranch while he was away buying cattle. "I should have been there," he concluded. "Might have made a difference. Or you might have died alongside them," Zara said gently. "Does blaming yourself bring them back?" The question hung in the air between them, uncomfortable in its simple truth. As they approached a fork in the road, thunder rumbled in the distance. Logan glanced at the sky with concern. "Another storm's coming. The Wilson place is still 4 miles ahead, but my homestead is just over that rise. We should wait out the weather there." Zara nodded, and Logan turned the wagon toward his property. As they crested the hill, Logan felt a sudden self-consciousness as Zara got her first look at his home. The 2-story cabin stood in a clearing surrounded by pine trees, with a barn and corral nearby. A small creek ran along the eastern edge of the property. He'd built it all himself, planning for a future he never expected to have. "It's beautiful," Zara breathed. like something from a painting. Pride warred with embarrassment as Logan helped her down from the wagon. It's not much, he demurred. Too big for one man, as everyone likes to remind me. Inside, the main room was sparsely furnished but clean, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A dining table with 6 chairs stood near a kitchen area equipped with a cast-iron stove and cupboards. "May I?" Zara asked, gesturing around the room. At Logan's nod, she explored the space, running her fingers along the smooth wooden mantel. "You built this yourself?" "Every board," Logan confirmed, stoking the fire to ward off the chill from the approaching storm. "It's a home waiting for life," Zara observed quietly. "For laughter and conversation and—" She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "Forgive me. I'm being presumptuous." Rain began to pelt the roof, and wind whistled through the trees outside. Logan busied himself making coffee while Zara stood by the window, watching the storm. "My father would say this is good weather for stories," she said. "He used to tell the most wonderful tales on stormy nights." Something in her voice made Logan look up. Despite her brave front, he saw a loneliness in her eyes that mirrored his own. "I'm not much of a storyteller," he admitted, "but I'd like to hear one of yours." And so as the storm raged outside, Zara told him about growing up in Boston, about her father's bookshop and her mother's garden, about the dreams she'd had before life had taken an unexpected turn. "I always imagined adventure," she confessed, "though being abandoned at the altar wasn't exactly what I had in mind." "What kind of adventure did you imagine?" Logan asked, finding himself genuinely curious. "Building something meaningful. Creating a real home, not just a house. Having children someday." She smiled self-consciously. "Simple dreams, I suppose." "Not simple," Logan said. "Brave. Out here, dreams like that take courage." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, Logan felt a connection he hadn't experienced in years. Then Chief nickered loudly from the barn, breaking the spell. "I should check on him," Logan said, standing abruptly. The storm might have spooked him. Outside, sheltered under the barn's overhang, Logan took a deep breath of rain-washed air. What was he doing? This woman was bound for the Wilson farm, not looking to get entangled with a man who'd spent years convincing himself he was better off alone. When he returned to the cabin, Zara had set out plates and was warming some of Mrs. Hadley's bread on the stove. "I hope you don't mind," she said. It seemed a shame to let good bread go stale. They shared a simple meal of bread and beans as the storm gradually subsided. By late afternoon, the sky had cleared enough for them to continue their journey. At the Wilson farm, Mrs. Wilson welcomed Zara warmly, and the children immediately surrounded her with curious questions. Logan found himself lingering, watching as Zara effortlessly charmed the entire family. "She's a godsend," Mrs. Wilson whispered to Logan. "Thank you for finding her." As he prepared to leave, Zara walked him to his wagon. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything." "It was nothing," Logan replied, suddenly awkward. "It wasn't nothing to me," Zara insisted. "You showed kindness when I needed it most." Logan couldn't think of a proper response, so he simply nodded, tipped his hat, and climbed onto his wagon. As he drove away, he fought the urge to look back, knowing that if he did, he might not want to leave. Over the next few weeks, Logan found increasingly flimsy reasons to visit the Wilson farm. He brought extra vegetables from his garden, offered to help mend their fence, and even volunteered to take the older Wilson children fishing, activities that inevitably brought him into Zara's orbit. Each encounter revealed more of her character, her patience with the children, her quick wit, her determination to master frontier skills that were entirely foreign to her Boston upbringing. Logan found himself sharing more of himself than he had with anyone since his parents' deaths, telling her about his dreams for his ranch, and even, eventually, about the guilt and grief he still carried. "The frontier doesn't forgive weakness," he told her one evening as they sat on the Wilsons' porch after the children had been put to bed. "That's why I keep to myself. Caring about people just gives life more ways to hurt you." Zara considered this, her face thoughtful in the fading light. "Perhaps," she said finally. "But isn't that true anywhere? My parents died of influenza in Boston, surrounded by neighbors and doctors. Would they have been safer here?" "At least in a city, you're not alone against everything," Logan argued. "Are you?" Zara challenged. "When your fence needed mending last week, didn't 3 neighbors come to help? When Mrs. Peterson had her baby, Didn't everyone for miles around bring food and gifts? Logan had no answer for this. He'd been so focused on protecting himself from loss that he'd failed to recognize the community forming around him. The following Sunday, Logan attended church for the first time in years, telling himself it was simply to hear news about cattle prices. If he happened to sit in a pew near where Zara sat with the Wilson family, that was mere coincidence. After the service, Reverend Thompson cornered him. "Good to see you, Logan. Will we be seeing more of you now that Miss Blackwell has joined our community?" Logan felt heat rise in his face. "Just keeping up with local happenings," he muttered. The Reverend's knowing smile only deepened Logan's discomfort. "Of course. Though I must say, Miss Blackwell's presence seems to have brightened more than just the Wilson household." Before Logan could respond, a commotion near the church steps drew everyone's attention. A well-dressed man had arrived on horseback and was now engaged in heated conversation with Mrs. Hadley. "That's him," Mrs. Hadley exclaimed, pointing toward the church. "Zara, your wayward fiancé has returned." Logan felt as though he'd been kicked in the chest as Edward Holloway strode toward Zara, who had gone pale. "My darling," Edward called, his voice carrying across the churchyard. "I've come to make amends and claim my bride." The assembled townspeople watched in shocked silence as Edward reached Zara and took her hand. "I made a terrible mistake," he declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I was overcome with fear, but I've come to my senses. The investments I went to secure have paid off handsomely. We can be married today and begin our life together in comfort." Logan stood frozen, watching Zara's face. Her expression was unreadable as she gently extracted her hand from Edward's grasp. "You left me standing alone in a church full of strangers," she said, her voice steady despite its softness. "You abandoned me without means or explanation in an unfamiliar territory." Edward had the grace to look ashamed. "A moment of weakness I deeply regret, but I've come back to make it right." Before Zara could respond, Mrs. Wilson stepped forward. "Miss Blackwell is employed by our family now, Mr. Holloway. She's become indispensable to us. And to others," Reverend Thompson added meaningfully, with a glance toward Logan. Edward's smile faltered slightly. "Surely a temporary position cannot compare to marriage and a comfortable home in Helena? I've purchased a lovely house, Zara. You'll want for nothing." Logan felt sick. He had no claim on Zara, no right to interfere. If she chose to leave with Edward, he would have to accept it. Wasn't this exactly why he'd avoided attachments? People always left in the end. Without waiting to hear Zara's response, Logan turned and walked away, heading for where Chief was tethered. Behind him, he could hear the continued murmurs of the crowd, but he didn't look back. He mounted his horse and rode home, his thoughts as turbulent as a summer storm. That night, Logan sat alone on his porch, a bottle of whiskey his only companion. The house behind him seemed emptier than ever, mocking his solitary existence. He'd been a fool to think anything had changed. A sound in the darkness made him reach instinctively for his rifle before a familiar voice called out. "It's only me," Zara said, emerging from the shadows. She was riding one of the Wilsons' horses, her hair loose around her shoulders in the evening breeze. Logan set his rifle aside, his heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" Zara dismounted gracefully and tied her horse beside Chief. "You left rather abruptly today." "Seemed like a private matter," Logan said stiffly. "Did it?" Zara asked, climbing the porch steps to stand before him. "I thought it concerned you greatly, given how pale you went when Edward appeared." Logan looked away. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that I'm not the same woman who arrived in Montana Territory looking for security through marriage. That I've found purpose here and respect, and—" She hesitated, then continued softly, "and feelings I hadn't expected." Logan's gaze snapped back to her face. "Zara, I told him no, Logan. I refused his proposal." The relief that flooded through Logan was so intense it left him lightheaded. "Why?" "Because a man who abandons his commitments once will do so again," she said practically. Then, more softly, "and because my heart is no longer available to him." Logan stood slowly, scarcely daring to hope. "Where is it then?" "I think you know," Zara whispered. Logan reached for her hand, marveling at how small it felt in his. "I've spent 3 years convincing myself that caring for someone was too dangerous out here. And now?" Zara asked. "Now I'm wondering if facing the frontier alone is the greater risk," Logan admitted. "Every time I see you, I feel like I'm waking up from a long sleep." Zara's smile was radiant in the moonlight. "Then perhaps it's time to fully awaken." Logan drew her closer, his free hand gently cupping her cheek. "I can't promise it will be easy. The land is unforgiving, and I'm still learning how to let go of the past." "I don't want easy," Zara replied. "I want real. I want a partner to build something meaningful with, someone who sees me clearly and stands beside me anyway." As Logan lowered his lips to hers, he felt the walls around his heart crumble completely. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with the hunger of two souls who had found their match against all odds. When they finally parted, Logan rested his forehead against hers. "I should take you back to the Wilsons before they send out a search party." "Actually," Zara said with a mischievous smile, "Mrs. Wilson suggested I come find you. She said, and I quote, 'That boy's been mooning over you for weeks. Put him out of his misery, one way or another.'" Logan laughed, the sound rusty from disuse, but genuine. "I've been that obvious." "Apparently to everyone except me," Zara admitted. "I thought you were simply being neighborly." They sat together on the porch steps, talking until the moon rose high above the mountains. Logan told her about his plans for the ranch, his dreams of expanding the herd and perhaps adding sheep. Zara shared her own hopes, to continue teaching the Wilson children, but also to create a real home again. As the night grew cooler, Logan reluctantly saddled Chief to escort Zara back to the Wilson farm. The ride was quiet, both of them absorbed in the newness of their feelings and the possibilities that had suddenly opened before them. At the Wilsons' gate, Logan helped Zara dismount, holding her perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "May I call on you properly?" he asked. "With Mrs. Wilson's permission, of course." Zara's answering smile warmed him to his core. "I would be disappointed if you didn't." Summer faded into autumn, and Logan's courtship of Zara became the talk of Whitewater Springs. They attended church together, shared Sunday dinners with the Wilsons, and spent long afternoons walking the boundaries of Logan's property, planning improvements and discussing the future. Yet shadows from the past still lingered. As October brought the first frost, word reached town that the Blackwell gang, no relation to Zara despite the shared surname, had robbed a bank in Helena and was heading south, possibly toward Whitewater Springs. The news sent Logan into a dark spiral. These were the same outlaws who had destroyed his family's ranch in Texas. He'd tracked them for months before losing their trail in Wyoming territory. Now they were here, threatening his new chance at happiness. "I won't let them take anything else from me," Logan told Sheriff Daniels grimly. "I want to join the posse." "No," the sheriff replied firmly. "I need men who can think clearly, not those looking for personal vengeance." Furious, but helpless, Logan threw himself into preparing his homestead for a possible attack. He reinforced doors and windows, cleaned and checked his weapons, and insisted that Zara remain at the Wilson farm, which was closer to town and safer. "You're scaring me," Zara said when she visited and found him installing iron bars on the windows. "This isn't like you. You don't understand what these men are capable of," Logan replied, his voice tight. "I've seen it firsthand." "Then help me understand," she pleaded. "Don't shut me out just when I thought you were letting me in." But Logan couldn't find the words to describe the nightmares that had returned. Visions of his parents' bodies among the smoking ruins, the mocking laughter of the outlaws as they rode away with everything of value. He couldn't bear the thought of losing Zara the same way. "It's better if we keep our distance until this is over," he said finally, unable to meet her eyes. "I need to focus on being ready." Hurt flashed across Zara's face. "So at the first sign of danger, you retreat behind your walls. What happened to facing the frontier together?" "This isn't some romantic notion, Zara. This is life and death. And that's precisely when people who care for each other should stand together," she countered. "But I see you've made your choice." She turned to go, then paused at the door. "The Blackwells may have taken your family, Logan. Don't let them take your future too." After she left, Logan sat heavily at his table, head in his hands. She was right, but fear had him in its grip. Not fear for himself, but terror at the thought of Zara being harmed because of him. 2 days later, the Blackwell gang struck. Not at Logan's ranch or in Whitewater Springs, but at the Wilson farm. Logan was in town when he heard the shots. Without waiting for the sheriff, he mounted Chief and galloped toward the Wilson property, his heart in his throat. By the time he arrived, smoke was rising from the barn, and he could hear screams. Samuel Wilson lay wounded on the ground near the house, a bullet in his shoulder. They took the women, he gasped when Logan reached him. My wife, the girls, and Zara. Said they needed hostages. Cold fury washed over Logan. Which way? North, toward Rattlesnake Pass, Samuel groaned. Logan, there's 5 of them. Logan checked Samuel's wound, determined it wasn't immediately life-threatening, and helped him into the house where the 2 youngest Wilson boys were hiding under a bed. Stay here and keep pressure on that wound, Logan instructed. I'll bring them back. Without waiting for a reply, Logan rode north, following the obvious trail the outlaws had left. They were confident, not bothering to hide their tracks, and had at least an hour's head start. As he rode, memories of the past mingled with fears for the present. His parents had died because he wasn't there to protect them. Would history repeat itself with Zara? The thought was unbearable. Logan pushed Chief harder than he ever had before, and by late afternoon, he caught sight of dust rising ahead. He dismounted and continued on foot, rifle in hand, using the rocky terrain for cover. From a ridge overlooking a small canyon, he finally spotted them. The Blackwell gang had made camp by a stream, their 5 horses tethered nearby. The women were huddled together under a tree, guarded by one of the outlaws while the others prepared a fire. Logan recognized James Blackwell immediately. The leader was unmistakable with his scarred face and black duster. The sight of him sent a wave of hatred through Logan, so intense it nearly took his breath away. But then his gaze found Zara. She sat with her arm around young Mary Wilson, her face dirty but composed. Even in captivity, she was trying to comfort the others. The sight centered Logan, reminding him what truly mattered. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about protecting those he loved. Logan settled in to wait and watch, formulating a plan. The odds were terrible, 5 armed men against 1, but he had surprise on his side, and motivation far stronger than theirs. As dusk fell, Logan made his move. He circled the camp, approaching from the opposite ridge where the horses were tethered. The first thing he did was cut the horses loose, sending them scattering with a sharp whistle. In the confusion that followed, Logan fired 2 careful shots, taking down the guard nearest the women and another outlaw who was reaching for his gun. Get to the trees, he shouted to the captives. Mrs. Wilson and the girls ran immediately, but Zara hesitated, looking for the source of his voice. That momentary pause nearly proved fatal as James Blackwell grabbed her, using her as a shield. Show yourself, Blackwell called, pressing a gun to Zara's temple. Or the pretty one dies first. Logan's blood ran cold. He was caught in the exact scenario he had feared most, someone he loved in danger because of him. I'm the one you want, Blackwell, Logan called, stepping into view with his hands raised, his rifle left behind in the rocks. The son of John Fitzgerald. You killed my parents in Texas 3 years ago. Blackwell squinted at him, recognition dawning. The rancher's boy. Thought we'd seen the last of you in Wyoming. Let her go, Logan said, taking a step forward. Your quarrel is with me. Blackwell laughed. My quarrel is with anyone who has something I want. His grip on Zara tightened. And right now, I'm thinking I want her. Logan saw Zara's expression shift from fear to determination. Before he could speak again, she stomped hard on Blackwell's foot and drove her elbow into his ribs. The outlaw's grip loosened just enough for her to twist away. In the split second of distraction, Logan drew the pistol hidden at the small of his back and fired. His bullet caught Blackwell in the shoulder, spinning him around. The remaining 2 gang members opened fire, forcing Logan to dive for cover. A frantic gunfight ensued. Logan managed to wound 1 more outlaw before his pistol clicked empty. He scrambled behind a boulder as bullets splintered the rock around him. Then, unexpectedly, shots rang out from a different direction. Sheriff Daniels and his posse had arrived, drawn by the gunfire. Caught in crossfire, the remaining outlaws quickly surrendered. In the aftermath, Logan found Zara tending to Mrs. Wilson, who had twisted her ankle during their escape. You came for us, Zara said simply when she saw him. I'll always come for you, Logan replied, his voice rough with emotion. I'm sorry I pushed you away. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was waste precious time we could have had together. Zara touched his face gently. You're here now? That's what matters. Sheriff Daniels approached, interrupting their reunion. Fitzgerald, you disobeyed a direct order not to pursue these men. Yes, sir, Logan acknowledged. The sheriff's stern expression held for a moment before cracking into a reluctant smile. Good thing you did. We might have been too late otherwise. James Blackwell and his surviving gang members were bound and loaded onto horses for the journey to the territorial prison. As they passed, Blackwell fixed Logan with a hateful stare. This isn't over, Fitzgerald, he spat. Yes, it is, Logan replied steadily. You have no power over me or my future anymore. As the posse departed with their prisoners, Logan turned back to Zara, taking both her hands in his. When I thought I might lose you, I realized something. The frontier isn't what makes life dangerous. It's refusing to live fully because we're afraid of loss. Zara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. What are you saying, Logan? I'm saying I love you, Zara Blackwell. I love your courage and your kindness and the way you see beauty where others see only hardship. I'm saying I don't want to waste another day pretending I can live without you. To Logan's surprise, Zara laughed, a joyous, relieved sound. I was beginning to think you'd never say it. I love you too, you stubborn, noble man. The church in Whitewater Springs was filled to capacity on a crisp November morning as Logan Fitzgerald waited at the altar. This time, there would be no abandonment, no empty promises. When Zara appeared at the church door on Samuel Wilson's arm, now recovered from his wound, Logan felt his heart might burst from happiness. She wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Hadley had helped her make, with tiny blue flowers embroidered along the hem. Her honey blonde hair was arranged in an elegant knot, with a few tendrils framing her face. At 22, Zara had traveled across a continent, survived abandonment and abduction, and somehow found the courage to love a man as broken as Logan had been. As she walked toward him, Logan marveled at how much his life had changed in just 6 months. When she reached him, Logan couldn't resist whispering, "Their loss is my treasure," making Zara smile with recognition of the words he'd first spoken to her in private after Edward Holloway had departed town for good. Reverend Thompson beamed at the couple before beginning the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found each other against all odds. The vows they exchanged were simple but heartfelt, promises to stand together through whatever the frontier might bring, to build a home filled with love and laughter, to face each sunrise as partners rather than solitary survivors. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Logan kissed Zara with a tenderness that belied the passion he felt, mindful of their audience, but unable to fully hide the depth of his emotion. The celebration afterwards spilled from the church to the town square, with everyone contributing food and music. Even old Samuel Wilson danced, his injured arm in a sling, but his spirit undampened. As evening approached, Logan and Zara slipped away from the festivities, boarding the wagon that would take them to their home. Their home, no longer just Logan's lonely outpost but the beginning of a shared dream. Are you happy? Logan asked